Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Learn to Code with Me podcast. I'm your host, Laurence Bradford. If you're listening to this episode between June 22nd and June 26th of 2020, you're in luck. You have the chance to get 33 amazing tech products basically for the price of one during the annual Learn to Code with Me Tech Toolbox sale. Over 24 top-notch creators have come together to offer their courses and ebooks on a ton of different topics within the tech space. Your chance to get this bundle is ending Friday, June 26th at midnight Eastern Time, so don't wait too long to get this deal. You can learn more about our annual bundle sale at learntocodewith.me/Toolbox 2020. And now for our guest today, Erik Hanchett. Erik is actually a bundle contributor. His course in the bundle this year is all about Vue.js, and he's going to show you how to build a Twitter replica. Erik is a senior software engineer at an insurance technology firm in Reno, Nevada. He's also an author, YouTuber, podcast co-host, and a blogger. Even though Erik has a traditional computer science degree, his path wasn't very traditional. He took a break after college for a few semesters, took a job in tech support for a few years, and then he actually went back to finish his degree in computer science. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Erik's journey to becoming a senior software engineer, why having a computer science degree doesn't mean you don't have to keep teaching yourself how to code, why he recommends learning the Vue.js framework, and so much more. All right, let's get into it. Enjoy this interview with Erik Hanchett. Hey, Erik, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Laurence. Good to be here.
So to get things going, I would love to hear a bit about you and your experience, how you first got into programming, and if you don't mind, could you also tell us where you live and just what your current situation is like?
Sure, yeah. I live in Reno, Nevada. And I'm a software developer. I work for a company here in town, sort of an insurance company called Cerity, where we do workers' compensation insurance. I'm at home right now because of the whole COVID thing. Everyone in our company is working from home, which that's quite a different experience. I was working from an office. And, I kind of got into programming when I was young. When I was really back in high school was the first time I jumped into being a developer. I started creating, if you can believe it, I'm dating myself a little bit. I created websites and put them up on different free hosting platforms. GeoCities was one of them. I also had a MySpace page. So things like that sort of is kind of how I started.
Awesome. And did you go to college to study computer science, or did you go to college at all?
Yeah. So I went to college in the 2000s. Yep, I went to college. I started off, my college journey is probably like some people listening here. I started college right after high school, but then I dropped out, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. I was working tech support for quite a while, but I decided at some point that I wanted to get back into college. And one of the reasons why, and I think we're gonna touch on this later on in the interview, is just because the job market at that time wasn't that great, and really, and things have changed. It was more difficult at that point to actually get into development without a college degree. So I had dropped out. I had troubles finding a developer job with just a high school education. Back then, this was the early 2000s. There wasn't a free code camp. YouTube didn't come around until, I think, 2004, 2005. So there was very few resources out there for self-taught developers. There was no coding boot camps back then. I mean, pretty much if you wanted to teach yourself how to become a developer, you had to go to the local library and check out books and just study those. Or there was some communities on IRC channels and things like that you might be able to get a hold of, but it wasn't as diverse. There wasn't as much resources as there was today. So being a young person back then, I thought, my chances of breaking into the industry, especially in a town like Reno, where there's not a ton of opportunities, and all the opportunities out there require most of them blatantly said on the job application that they prefer a computer science degree, and if not a master's degree. I thought it would be a difficult road ahead to kind of break into the profession without a computer science degree.
Got it. So you say early 2000s. Was that after the .com bubble, which was in 2001? I feel like I'm doing like a history course. So was it shortly after that?
Yeah, you're right. So I had graduated from high school in 1999, and then right after that, kind of the .com bust was around 2001. So the job market was pretty terrible back then, anyways. So just trying to find a job after the .com bust was not good, and having no education other than high school education and no experience made it even more difficult. So I ended up just working mostly in tech support during that time. I think I've entered the job market in bad times both times, because when I graduated college, it was just at the height of the housing crisis bubble, and it popped as soon as I graduated, and then there was like another lull in people hiring tech workers. And I think, sadly, from what I've seen now, it sounds like we're going through another one right now with COVID. We're hoping that the economy bounces back in the next few months. Maybe this is like a time capsule for people to hear it from 2 years from now or whenever they end up listening to this. But as of right now, we're hoping that it doesn't become another recession.
Yeah, I was seeing something on social media, and it was about the students that are graduating college or high school now. I can't figure out the years in my head, but whatever group they were talking about, I guess it must be high school, because they would have been born around 9/11, I think, and now they're graduating high school. So they were born in like a tumultuous time. They're graduating high school, obviously, in a tumultuous time with the coronavirus, and not, maybe even being able to go to college, like a campus in the fall. And also for people, graduating college right now and entering the job market, obviously it's not, the best time. Like, it's affecting, so many aspects of the world. It's crazy. But circling back to your story, so you went back to school, I guess maybe around like 2004, and then you got like a bachelor's in computer science, and then you wrapped that up around 2008.
Right. Yeah. I kind of took a break off of high school, and I did one semester of school, dropped out of college, and during those years there was a lot of working at tech support, a lot of playing video games and MMOs, and not really super focused on my career at that time, kind of living life. But then I decided to go back to school, in 2004, and really 2003, 2004, and then graduated around that time. I was going to say I buckled down during that time, just during college, working about a 10 to 20 hour job, then going to school full time, just working on my studies. And one thing with the computer science curriculum at my college was that it's, and probably like many other colleges out there, it was heavily focused on theory, and there was quite a bit of math and physics. So those are kind of difficult topics for someone that was not very good in math and physics in high school. So I needed to kind of take extra work to get through those classes. I mean, computer science degree is one of those ones that typically it's hard to just skate through. Those classes could be difficult. So it was definitely a challenge for me. It was one of the reasons I kind of dropped out the first time, because I realized all the work that I would need. But then when I got focused, I just started working really hard. And I understand, thinking back, that it was the only path that I thought was available for me at the time, and I'm glad now that there's many other ways for people to get into this industry.
Yeah, for sure. And when you left that program, what was your first job like out the gate? I know you said you graduated at not an ideal time in the economy with the housing crisis going on around 2008. Did it take you a while to find a job? Did you land something relatively quick?
Yeah, it was. I remember back then it was definitely more difficult to land that first job, even with someone who had a college degree and a computer science degree. I remember going on applying for many jobs, talking to many hiring managers. Some of them I would get to the actual phase of actually being on site, and some of them I wouldn't even get past the sending in the resume. I remember one interview I did. It was, I don't want to call out the company's name, but it was an all-day interview. It was like a 45-minute drive from my house. And I remember getting to the interview at 8 a.m. I'm this fresh college grad, really wanting to try to impress them. And they got me into a room with 10 other engineers, and I started getting peppered with questions. I remember going in and having to do a whiteboarding interview for one group. The next hour, they brought another group in. I had to do another whiteboarding interview. And then I remember not doing great. I felt like I didn't do that great in those first two interviews. And then having lunch with the team, and everyone on the team was talking around me, but no one was talking to me. So I felt like, this isn't going very well. And then at the end, having to meet the HR in another department, and it was just like a draining experience. And then after that full day interview, they ghosted me. I never got a call back, so I had to email the person that I knew. And they had said, "Oh yeah, we just found someone else we liked more. Sorry, thank you for applying." And I would just remember having exhausting interviews like that back then. It was a lot of work.
Wow, that's wild. And I feel like when you were telling that story, I just had a memory come to me from early on in my tech days, which was, this was probably 2013, 2014. So after you, but still from 2020, a decent amount of time ago. So the experience you just described reminds me of a very old school IT company, or just a more of an old school sort of company. Because I feel like nowadays tech interviews are not like that. But the experience that sort of triggered for me was, I won't name the company either, but there was it's still around, and it's a few thousand people, and it's an IT kind of consulting company, but they do stuff with computer programming, and they do a lot of different stuff. The company's privately run. It's a few thousand people even, and it is a successful company, but it's definitely very old school, the way it's run and operated, and maybe there's a better word to use, it's not a modern company like Google. And I remember I wasn't even properly interviewing there, but I knew someone who worked there who was kind of higher up. It was a friend of my parents. Sorry, I'm going to a whole story here, but the point, I just want to give context into this. And he would, he had worked there for 20 years. So he was again higher up, and he allowed me to kind of do part of their interview process for programmers, even though I wasn't fully interviewing, kind of a way to help me get experience basically. I totally forgot about this until you mentioned this. But I remember one part of this kind of mock interview, let's say, was doing this written exam. Have you ever had to do this? And I think it was called the Computer Aptitude something exam. And it was literally it was an SAT. It was timed. You couldn't use a calculator. And it was pencil, paper. There was the HR person there watching me. And it was an SAT, and lo and behold, I actually did really well on it, which is shocking because I didn't do well on the SATs, and I took the GRE before when I thought I was going to go to grad school. I didn't do well on that either. But this kind of computer aptitude test, which was all logic and problem solving, it was an SAT. I actually did well on, but it was so nerve-wracking, and I wasn't even really interviewing. I was just doing a mock thing. Anyhow, that's just triggered that memory for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's how that's how it was back then. I think nowadays, and I have gone through some interviews in the last few years, it feels like it's a little bit more lax, but just depends on the company. If you're interviewing for one of these large FANG type companies like Facebook, Alphabet, Google, Apple, you might have this one day, all day interview where you have multiple rounds of whiteboarding, maybe a test too. I remember talking to a friend that worked for a large phone company and for a senior engineer role, and he had architecture questions. He had whiteboarding. He had a test, like you're saying. It's crazy how in our industry that I don't know if it's like this for doctors or lawyers or anything else. They don't send them an all day tests or all-day interviews where they test them on knowledge that they learned in college, but that's kind of the way we do it here in our world.
Yeah, the other thing that and I don't have a computer science degree, but from other people I've spoken to who have them and it probably depends on where you go to school, but I've heard that there's a lot of things the computer science degree doesn't teach you or even talk about that you need to know when you get into the real work world. So things maybe like Scrum or using Jira or other kinds of tools, these software management tools that are very industry standard, but never talked about in a classroom.
Computer science curriculum varies between colleges, and there's also ones that are like computer engineering or computer architecture. I mean, there's a few, several, I guess you could say, depending on your college and curriculum, that are kind of in the computer space. I know the traditional computer science curriculum that I went through was more a lot of theory, a lot of mathematics. Like I said, it had some sciences in there too. And the computer classes, I mean, usually you would have one every semester. You have one or two, and then when you get farther down to your, I guess, third year, fourth year, or junior or senior year, depending on where you are in the world, those classes, you tend to have more of your kind of core or your mandatory classes you need to graduate, and some of them do touch on some of those topics you're talking about. Sometimes they're electives, like we had a grad student teach a class on version control, which is typically something that you wouldn't learn in a computer science curriculum, but maybe it's an elective that you can learn. And then our last class, we had to do the waterfall method. So we had to write up requirements like we were in a real job, and we had to do user stories. And this is before Jira and Basecamp were as popular as they are today. So it just depends on the curriculum, but for the most part, you're not going to learn everything that you would learn on the job. So it's more of teaching you the theory and some things, and then usually programs will pick one or two languages to teach you. Sometimes, like in MIT, I believe they teach a lot of stuff in Python. My program was moving from C++ to Java, and then I know that there's some programs that do web development as their curriculum, but it's few and far between. I think it's still more of these other languages, because it's easier to teach something like C++ or Java, because then you can also teach things like object-oriented programming and some of the other things. You definitely will not learn everything you need for a day-to-day job, though. So you're not going to learn probably all the version control. You're probably not going to learn the details of the Scrum. You're probably, if your curriculum does teach web development, it's probably pretty rare. So you're going to have to learn a lot of those things by yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So switching gears a little bit, you have a podcast called Selftaught or Not, which, by the way, I love that name. That's really catchy. And you talk to different people about how they broke into the tech industry. And I was wondering, now in 2020, obviously a lot has changed since you got into tech. Heck, since I first started, teaching myself how to code, a lot has changed as well. What do you think, is the best route for someone to go, if they're weighing a CS degree or maybe a coding boot camp or just teaching themselves fully?
I don't think you're going to like this answer, but I guess it depends, like many things else in life. So it definitely depends on where you are. So like I had said earlier in this interview, there wasn't a whole lot of choices for me in the early 2000s to kind of break into development. Now there's a lot more choices. We have, and you've interviewed a lot of boot camp grads. You've interviewed people that run boot camps. So obviously a lot of people listening to this podcast are familiar with the kind of the boot camp way of going things. Of course, there's the self-taught. So really, it really depends on where you're coming from and who you are to determine that. I still think, and I've really seen a shift in the last probably, 10 years, where in the past, everybody said, oh, you want to get into computers, you want to get into programming, you should go to college and you should get a degree and probably a computer science degree, and then you can join everyone else. But in the last probably 3 or 4 years, I've seen definitely a shift where people are recommending people not to go to college, where I've seen, maybe it's my own bubble, I don't know if you've seen this, Laurence, but it feels like a lot of people are recommending people not to go into this field or not to go into the traditional way. A lot of people saying, I've even heard as much as people on Twitter saying we shouldn't gatekeep. Like, employers shouldn't gatekeep prospective candidates who don't have computer science degrees. Like, computer science degrees or a college degree shouldn't be any kind of rubric to judge someone for a job. Like, I've seen people go on rants on that. I think that's going a little bit too far, in my personal opinion. I think those of us who have gotten college degrees or a computer science degree, that should be one of many, many pieces that employers use to determine if they want to hire you or not. Obviously, if you're very self-motivated, then maybe, and you've gone the self-taught route and you have a portfolio and you could show that you can do the work, employers should take that into consideration too. In fact, I've done some hiring at companies I've worked. I've interviewed developers, and I kind of look at who they are today, and I do look at their past and where they worked at, but I don't necessarily say they have to have a computer science degree. So going back to your original question, I would say the depends part would be, are you someone that could be would you be able to be motivated enough to teach yourself how to program? Are you going to be willing to work your regular probably job and then come home and work another 3 or 4 hours to learn programming? Are you going to be able to put yourself out there, create a GitHub account, create a portfolio without any help? Are you going to be able to just use online resources like the video courses, like Free Code Camp, or people like me, like watch my YouTube channel, or watch this podcast to kind of get tips and tricks? And that's the type of person that would be maybe good for the self-taught route. You can look at your past. Like, are you one of those people in school that was like an overachiever? Like, you would go home and you would just learn a topic inside and out. Maybe if that's like the type of person you are, like you can take one kernel of an idea and you can just run with it without any supervision. Maybe the self-taught route is good for you. Now, I think self-taught is probably the hardest of all the routes, because you're not just facing just being able to have the self-discipline to do it. You're going to also have to face the fact that once you start looking for jobs, there is still a lot of jobs out there that won't give you the time of day if you don't have some sort of certification or degree or some experience. So it's definitely going to be kind of the hard route. I've heard of self-taught developers who've had to send out literally hundreds of resumes before even getting one interview. And that's really disheartening. So so if you're the right type of person, you're willing to put it out there, maybe that's the right route. Now, if you need a little bit more structure, then self-taught bootcamp, or maybe a traditional degree is a better for you, because then you kind of get that kind of guardrails to help you along the way. You get the mentorship, you get the people to be around you. You're in kind of a group with other people, and fortunately, that does cost money. Typically, boot camps cost thousands of dollars, and we all know that a traditional education can be lots of money too. So it also probably depends on your financial situation. Can you afford a 4-year college? Also, if you're later in life, if you're maybe married and have kids, that's probably a lot more difficult to go back to school than it would be. Maybe a boot camp's a better option at that point. So that's kind of a long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it was a great answer, and I totally agree. Like, it 100% depends on so many different factors of the kind of person you are, your financial situation, your life situation. As you just said, some folks can't just go to a 4-year college because they're, a breadwinner or one of the main income earners of the household, and they have people relying on them, and they, can't just, going back to college, right? It's just not an option. But it is great that now in 2020 and beyond, there are so many different options for people. Like, there are these also hybrid kind of boot camps, I think of them as, where it's not as expensive as a full-blown boot camp, but maybe it is $200 a month or something about that, and it will have a bit more hand-holding than just being fully self-taught. But as you said, it's like totally possible, whichever route you go on, they're just going to be different. I want to switch back though to your own experience, because now, like, so you've been in tech for quite some time. You have a popular YouTube channel where you put out a lot of videos. By the way, like, congratulations. I was looking at that just the other day, and I remember I use YouTube a lot, but more so for like personal like things or things I'm looking up, not for like coding kind of videos. But I went to your YouTube channel, and I swear the last time I looked at it, it was like 1,000 subscribers. Now it's like, how much? I mean, by the time this airs, it'll be even more, but it's like 50,000 or 60 or something like that.
Yeah, nearly 60,000. It's been a kind of a labor of love the last couple years, just putting it out there, almost just on a whim when I started. That's a whole other story, but it's just been fun the last couple years, interacting with people, kind of building that audience up. It definitely wasn't an overnight success. I had to put a lot of effort into it to get to where it is now, and I'm hoping to grow it even further in the months and years to come.
Yeah, that's awesome. So okay, this is kind of like a selfish question, but I feel like, so you really took to video, obviously, right? Because I know you write books and you do other things too, but is video like your favorite platform to kind of create on?
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth.
I said medium. I should say medium because it's not really video is not really a platform. But yeah, sorry, your favorite medium to create on.
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth. When I started getting serious about my career after I graduated college, I did a few things, and I went and started blogging at first. And, actually probably around the same time your blog started, or maybe a little bit earlier, the Learn to Code with Me blog. But I liked blogging, but it felt like it took so much time to put my thoughts into words and to express something as some of these really technical kind of tutorials. And I found that at first video was super scary. So what ended up happening is, I'll just do a quick 2-minute version of what happened. After I went to college, I graduated and I got a number of jobs, but I actually started getting bored at one of my jobs, and I went back and got a degree in an MBA, a Master's in Business. And the Master's in Business had a class, a personal branding class, and it required us to create a blog and to do YouTube videos. And I found that after a while, the blogging was becoming very tedious, doing 2 or 3 blogs a week, 1,000 to 2,000 words at times. It was just making a tremendous amount of time. But if I could jump on a camera, it felt at first really, really hard. I was really scared and nervous to put my face and to talk to a camera for 5 to 10 minutes. The nerves were getting to me. But after I did that, probably for, I don't know, a dozen times, maybe it took 12 or 13 times, I got a lot more comfortable, and I could knock out a video explaining a topic on some sort of tutorial, something I wanted to teach, much quicker than it took to write it out in a tutorial. And then since then, I just been I kind of stopped blogging and then just focused more on the video.
Yeah, I feel like everyone has something that they prefer if they're like a creator, and there's always different mediums we can pick from. And I'm like the opposite of you. I think maybe I just love writing. I just never got that into video. I think what you said, there's some nerves involved, and also I find like video editing very tedious, but I know a bunch of other people, they're the opposite. They would so much rather create a video and edit it and put it out on a topic than writing something. So I guess, everyone is just different in how they like to communicate and how they like to create. But I just wanted to congratulate you on your success of the channel, because that's amazing. And you said it when you started your blog. Yeah, we first connected a really long time ago, and like years ago, like really early on when I started Learn to Code with Me. And I started my site technically, I guess, in April 2014. So, but the first year was a lot of figuring things out. So I'm not sure. I have a feeling we connected though, probably around that first year, I would guess, of me having the site. But yeah, anyhow, to watch you create the YouTube channel and have it grow so much, because you maybe really started publishing to your programming one just a few years ago, right? Like it wasn't back in 2014 that you were actively posting or publishing on there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it was more, I got serious in like 2017, and I had a few videos in there in 2016, maybe one in 2015. But it's really more 2017 when I got serious about doing video. And before then, I was mostly just blogging every now and then, and having fun with that. There's a whole other discussion about like how do you build an audience and personal branding and what that can do for your career, and I was all into that back then.
Yeah. And another thing you've done is you've published books. Could you list some of those off? And you talk about them. Yeah.
No problem. So while I was blogging, I got really into this JavaScript framework called Ember.js, which is a kind of the lesser known of the popular JavaScript framework / libraries out today. Most people have heard of React and probably Vue.js, at least people in the tech scene. I tell people about these and they're like, I have no idea what React is. What is that? And I have no idea what Vue is. I'm like, those are libraries and frameworks for us web developers. It's just funny. Hopefully everybody listening knows what those are. But Ember is kind of like, used to be more popular back then, but it's still a great framework. It's still going on today. And I was writing and blogging about it a lot. And I got approached by a publisher. And this is one really cool thing. And I'm sure, Laurence, if you've probably have a few publishers you've talked to throughout the years as well. So once you start putting yourself out there and you start writing and talking to people, like people will find you. And this publisher from Pact Publishing found me, and they wanted me to do a book. And so I spent, probably a year just writing a book with them, working with an editor and publishing it, and it was a great experience. I found that it was also a good way you talk about loving writing. I like writing a lot too, and just being able to work with an editor and finding out, I should probably write more like this, and this is some things that I'm doing wrong. It really helped me improve my writing, and it was kind of a fun experience. And it also, now I get to have published author after my name, which is cool and something I can brag about on my YouTube channel. I did go back to kind of finish the story. After I did that book, a couple years later, I started doing a lot of videos on Vue.js, which is also a favorite of mine, of JavaScript framework. And I got approached by another publisher, this time Manning, which I really respect them. They create really high-quality books. They have a very high standard when they publish books, unlike some other publishers out there. So it was kind of a grueling year and a half of writing this book. I must have done like 100 revisions on some of my chapters, but I produced a book I'm really proud of at the end, and I was able to publish that in 2018.
Wow, like a year and a half to write a book. That is, I know it takes a while to write books, like for any topic, but it's funny because things change so much in technology. How is it writing a book when things rapidly change so fast?
Yeah, it was difficult actually. When you start to end in the book publishing process is pretty complicated, but I'll simplify it to say that when you get to near the end of the book, there's a number of people that review your book, like professional tech reviewers, I guess you could call them. And so they knew the technology just as well as me, if not better, and they would bring up things like, hey, this just changed here, or I think you can explain this better, or this chapter could be better. And that is a big thing with Manning, that they have these points in the process of writing your book where they have professionals come in and review your book and give you suggestions. So throughout writing the book, I would have to go back to previous chapters and just make tweaks and changes. Usually the language or the framework, in this case Vue.js, didn't change that much from the time I started to the time I ended. I think it went from 2.0 to 2.6. Like, it did have a few revisions and there were some newer things added, but it wasn't like deprecating. They didn't have like right now we're in the middle of, for those of you in the Vue world, we're in the middle of transitioning from Vue 2 to Vue 3, and that's a bigger transition. But luckily, in the year and a half I was writing the book, there was only minor changes, and I was able to make sure that I got those incorporated into the book. And I even to this day, even though it was published in 2018, I still recommend the book to people that are wanting to learn Vue.js, just because the core concepts are all the same. Some of the things have been, some of the tooling's a little different, but they haven't deprecated the core of what Vue is, and that's what the book really taught. And that's also one thing when you're writing a book, is just to focus on things that aren't likely to change as much.
So I should have asked this before I got into that book question, but I was just like really eager to find out the answer about that, because I imagine it could be tricky with frameworks and all of these things changing rapidly. Could you talk a bit about Vue.js? Kind of backtracking here, because you are taking part in our 2020 bundle, and Vue.js, that's like the topic of the course that you are generously providing. And I would love to just learn more, or me, the listeners, learn more about it, like how it's used, and why you like it so much.
Yeah, Vue.js is something I started teaching and learning a few years ago, and it's near dear to my heart. It was created by Evan You. He used to work at Google, and this is probably back in the Angular 1 days, and he wanted just a more flexible, kind of lighter, faster framework to create web applications for. And kind of Vue was the genesis of that. And there was a few betas, and then it was released, and now it's up to just about Vue 3 right now. So for those of you in the audience, you may have heard of React.js, which I hinted about earlier before. So it's kind of a competitor to React, and something called Angular. I think out of all the different frameworks, the way I like to think of Vue is it's probably the easiest to kind of get started with when you're first starting to learn web development. It doesn't take a whole lot of learning. You don't have to know a whole lot of JavaScript. You use these things called directives, which you put directly into what we call our template, where we have our HTML. And it's just really easy to compose these apps. It's also called the progressive framework, because you can kind of start off with just adding it to any sort of web application by just adding in a script tag at the top of your app. You can use it really easily. It's lightweight. Or you can use something fully featured like Vue CLI, which is tooling that allows you to create a fully functional Vue app. So I was kind of really drawn to that because of the simplicity, of the ease of getting started. It's really easy to get your whole team up and running on Vue really quickly, rather than some other frameworks where you might need to know a little bit more JavaScript to get up and running. And it has this kind of elegant way of putting everything together in a single file component, where there's still some separation of concerns between your JavaScript, but your HTML isn't inside your JavaScript like React is, and your CSS, but they're all in the same file. So it's kind of and it also has just a really great community behind it. You know, I've gone to a few Vue confs, and I've talked to a lot of people in the community, and there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help each other out. And there's just so much resources too. I see like dozens of articles every week coming out teaching different concepts on Vue, and me included. So that's kind of a short answer to some of it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And I would also love to hear, and especially for people listening, is this the kind of framework someone who works as a front-end developer could be using? Like, is that usually the job role that would be using that?
Yep, you're right. Yeah, so this is a front-end single-page application front-end framework that you can use to create your front-end applications with.
Awesome. And then are there any like companies or organizations or anything that are well-known that use it?
Well, I was just at VueConf last in March, and I was just talking to a few companies that were using it. So, for example, Apple, there was a team from Apple that was there. One of their divisions was using it, and they were kind of soaking in all the information. I remember talking to people from Wikimedia, so the people that are behind Wikipedia. They have some of their apps or some of their websites have Vue.js in the background, so you may have heard of them. GitLab is a really big company that handles your version control. They're kind of a competitor to GitHub. They have it. Microsoft, Netlify, I mean, the list goes on. So there's a lot of big companies that are using it, and a lot of smaller companies too.
Who's the founder of GitLab? I'm so bad. I feel like I've interviewed him before, even on the show, and it was a few seasons ago. So it was early on in the company. If he's still there. So if you don't know, it's fine. I'm going to look it up later. Or I'm going to make a note to myself to look it up, because if he was, we're definitely going to include a link to that. It's funny because, and I'm sure you're like this with like YouTube videos, when you create so many, and especially over years, I don't know how some podcasts get, like some podcasts I'll listen to, they are so fast. They're like, oh, episode back in 2016, I had so-and-so on the show. I'm like, how do they remember that? I think they must have a spreadsheet next to them with everything printed out, because I'm like, my brain, I can only recall so much information, you know? If I interviewed someone in 2017, I don't know, maybe I just don't have good memory with that kind of stuff. But anyhow, making a note, because I think we did have him on the show. But okay, awesome. That's great. And then is that like the primary thing that you're teaching nowadays? So whether it's like blog or podcast, or I know you have courses as well, is it all around Vue?
Yeah. To go back to GitLab, they're definitely one of the companies that have really bought into Vue. I think everywhere in their company they have Vue inside and out. In some larger companies like Facebook or Apple, they'll probably have like a couple of different divisions using Vue, and then the rest are using React or Angular. So it does change up. To go back to your question of what I like to teach or what I'm teaching right now, yes, Vue is definitely kind of my favorite, and the topic that I teach the most, not just in my YouTube channel, but also the courses that I create. So there's actually a pretty large ecosystem of Vue technologies out there. So I teach everything from Vue.js, the core concepts to get started, to things. There's something called Nuxt.js, which is kind of a universal or server-side rendered version of Vue.js. It's a framework on top of Vue that does a couple of different things than Vue does. There's GridSum, which is kind of like a headless way to connect to CMSs. So I kind of teach everything in the Vue ecosystem, but I'm not limited to Vue. I definitely deep dive into, especially on my podcast and occasionally on my YouTube channel, just career advice for software developers. I don't like to be just to do Vue too. Sometimes I look at some backend technologies. I do Node. There's something called Reno that just came out, which is sort of like Node that I've been doing videos on. So I kind of bounce around with, but I guess you could say mostly Vue is kind of the core what I work on and teach.
Awesome. Well, we're running out of time, unfortunately, because I have other questions I want to ask, but it is what it is, right? But I would love if we could just leave on you giving advice to people listening who are where you were, years ago, and they're just starting out and they're trying to figure out what to do. Like what advice do you have for them?
I would say find a community that you can connect with. So if it's the Learn to Code with Me community, which is great, or if it's Free Code Camp, or if it's my community at if you follow my YouTube channels, or if it's Brad Traversy, he's also a big YouTuber. Just find a community that you really connect with, that you can get involved with, that can help push you along, that can help you answer your questions, that can give you advice, that can get you motivated. You'll find your tribe, find your people, and then just start doing more than just saying. So you have to not just watch all the content, but actually try to apply some of those concepts that you're learning. So if you join Free Code Camp, make sure you're doing the lessons. Make sure you're doing the work. If you kind of join in my community, make sure you watch some of my videos, but then try to do it yourself. And, I'd love to hear from, leave in the comments like, hey, I tried what you did and it worked, or I made a different version of it. So I would just say the advice for people listening that trying to get into it, find your community, and then try to limit the information that you get, and just try to make sure you're actually creating, not just listening. And because it's funny, this tech industry that we're in, especially YouTube, there's definitely a entertainment value to just watching people code. There's some very, very entertaining developers out there that it's just fun to watch, even though you may never learn anything or may never actually do it. But I think you have to kind of take the next step and and actually create things.
Awesome. Well, that's great advice to end this conversation on. Thank you again for taking the time to coming on the show today and sharing all this. Where can people find you online?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on a few different places. I'd say Twitter is a good one. So at ERIKCH, Eriks on Twitter. Or you can go to my YouTube channel. Just go to erik.video. And then I also have a website at programwitheric.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much again. Thanks for listening to the episode today. If you missed anything from this interview with Erik or would like a recap, you can find the show notes over on the Learn to Code With Me website at the URL learntocodewith.me/podcast. If you're listening to this episode in the future, simply click the search icon in the upper navigation and search for Erik's name. As I mentioned at the start of this episode, if you're listening to this interview during the week that it airs, you're in luck because we are in the middle of our annual Tech Bundle Sale, also known as the Ultimate Tech Career Toolbox. We only do this sale once a year, and it's a huge deal. For this week only, you can get access to 33 different technical online courses and books. These courses together, if you bought them each individually, would cost you $4,206. But for this week only, you can snag them all for a fraction of that price. Specifically, you can get them for 94% off. This bundle is perfect for beginners and intermediate folks alike. Whether you've never written a line of code before, or you've already mastered the basics and are ready to learn more, these courses and books will help you level up. With the Ultimate Tech Career Toolbox, you'll learn all kinds of web development languages, including front-end, back-end, and full stack, how to build your own web and mobile applications, which in-demand tech career might excite you, like machine learning, DevOps, or cybersecurity, how to use your tech skills to kick off a freelancing career or get hired at a dream job, and so much more. Here's what a bundle buyer from last year had to say about it. The bundle was a once-in-a-lifetime deal that will help me chase my dream of becoming a freelancer and a competent programmer. I knew it would help me get the momentum I needed to get more into coding and launch my career. And we've had hundreds of buyers in the past who all have the same sentiment. Also, this year, we're going to be doing something that I'm really excited about, and that's donating a portion of our sales to a nonprofit organization called All Star Code. All Star Code trains young Black and Latino men in coding and professional development. Their goal is to close the wealth, income, and opportunity gaps by educating and supporting a new generation of innovators in tech. And we're so excited to be supporting their cause this year in 2020. Again, this special bundle sale ends this Friday, June 26th at midnight Eastern Time. You can find out more at learntocodewith.me/toolbox2020. Again, the URL is learntocodewith.me/toolbox2020. All right, I'll see you next week.